Hello, everyone. This is uh, Randi Weingarten, and this is actually our third webinar this week in lots of different ways. I suspect that there are a couple of people that have been on all three of them. I know the staff has, but we kind of saved, even though Ali Velshi was fantastic, and we talked about his new book on Sunday. And even though talking about menopause and premenopause and postmenopause with some fantastic doctors yesterday was pretty informative to those who were on it. Today, the topic is not as well, it's really enticing for me. It's not as it's not as joyful or uh, for most, because who would have thought in the United States of America we would really have to be talking about and having a webinar about and really teaching about to all of you non-social studies teachers and to the social studies teachers and to the history and the sociology and the political science professors. You know all of this already, but this is a really important refresher. Who would have thought that we would have to really talk about countering authoritarianism, or talking about it, as we say in the title, how to stop a backsliding democracy in its tracks. But we're doing that because this is real. And this is probably the most important discussion that I've had with people this year, certainly since November 6th and January of last year and January 20th. And so I'm not sure, I'm just going to be as vulnerable as I can be. I am not sure I know how to make clear how dangerous a moment we find ourselves in the United States. Many of us in the US believe in our exceptionalism. And so we believe that we can conquer everything, including this kind of backsliding. We believe that our democracy will never go away. But the problem is we are closer to our democracy disappearing for most people in America than we've ever been before. Some people might argue we're closer to it than since the Civil War. Some people might argue we're closer to it than ever. Some people might argue that, unlike our first president of the United States of America, George Washington, who decided that he was a president, not a king, we have a very different president who believes in the maximalist use of executive power. So let me just take one step back and paint a picture, and then I'm going to turn it over to our exceptional panel today, who have forgotten more about this topic than I will ever know. And I've just penned a book on this topic that will be out for sale in September. But our panel really knows what they are talking about. So that's the book that I penned. It says, yes, it really does say Why Fascists Fear Teachers, and it is a compilation of the war on knowledge. But the people who are on our panel, we can take the slide down. The people on our panel really know what they are talking about in terms of this moment we're in, and not only how to recognize it, but how to fight it. And so we will tape this. We are taping this webinar, so you don't have to take notes. You have to be engaged. We need our members and the other folk who are watching this. We need you to be engaged, because the one thing we do know is the people united will always be able to fight a backsliding democracy. The people who go onto the streets, if there are enough, will show that our values conquer our fear. But let me just take a step back. Elon Musk announced today that he was walking back from government. He was leaving. He wasn't going to basically try, yes, we should have a lot of hearts for that. He wasn't going to try and basically buy another election. But he's done a lot of harm. They purged federal workers. He and Doge have operated as an unelected shadow government with limited transparency, virtually no accountability, but maximalist harm. Just ask someone who is alive and a retiree who's been sent a letter saying that he, she, or they are dead, and what they have to do to actually try to recover from that. This was even before the reconciliation bill. Think about what is now happening in terms of weather and how we have virtually no one who is dealing with the hurricanes and the kind of thermatic situations that we have in places like Kentucky just this week. Weather monitoring, FEMA recovery, cybersecurity, water and food safety, and I can go on and on. But in addition to the gutting of the federal service, the gutting of public education, public health, vaccines, libraries, higher education, cancer, Alzheimer research, the list goes on and on. This is all before what they're doing tonight in the Congress. And then the erasure, the targeting of people of color, the smearing people who are not white, who are not straight, who are not Christian, as someone as less than. The smearing and the targeting of people who have the audacity to say something negative or use their free speech rights, like Bruce Springsteen or Taylor Swift, who have said something about this government and they are told that they're going to be investigated. Or mayors, like the arresting of Ras Baraka or the investigation of Brandon Johnson for just speaking their truths. Or now, yesterday, the targeting of Congress people, the exploiting of fear of anti-Semitism to strong-arm universities, the banning of programs that help women or African Americans or other racial minorities or immigrants or transgender people, the attacks on Social Security, Medicaid, public service loan forgiveness, all of which has been earned. I can go on and on. The disappearing of people from the streets, the taking of a mother while her kids looked on, the taking of a father who is sent to a gulag, maybe never to be seen again, a sheet metal or a sheet metal worker, one of our ranks. And this is only 4 months into Trump's second term. Tonight, or maybe tomorrow, even though Donald Trump said today that he does not want to cut Medicaid, they are cutting almost $800 billion out of Medicaid. For what? For tax cuts for the wealthy. So if you're really wealthy, you'll get a big tax return. And if you're not, you're going to pay more money. So the question is not only why, but is there any kind of analog in history? And what does this all mean? And what can we do about all of this? So that is why we wanted to have and start this series. We can call it civic engagement. We can call it something, anything we want to call it in terms of democracy. We've done this in the past, and Erica has actually been with us when we did a Shanker Institute series several years ago, when we started seeing this backsliding into authoritarianism in the United States of America. But people didn't believe it. Even in this last election, people didn't believe it. So part of what we're trying to do as teachers is to actually start thinking about how we teach, how we educate ourselves, and how we educate others in ways that people can hear. Because the fastest way to move into authoritarianism or totalitarianism or fascism is for people not to believe it, or for people to be so fearful that they don't fight it. Now, unions, as well as teachers, have always been on the forefront in the fight against authoritarianism around the world. Unions are laboratories of democracy. We provide a training ground for people to engage in democratic participation, from voting to promoting economic opportunity to peaceful protest, and unions work to solve problems. In the AFT, we call this solution-driven unionism. When we see a problem, we seek to solve it, and you see a chart right now, or a slide right now, about some of the things that we can do to do this. Now, the most important thing I'll say before I turn it over to Erica is that authoritarianism can be stopped. Democratic backsliding can be stopped. But it does come to a trite expression for some, but real for me, we the people. Yes, we have to be engaged in Congress. We have to use collective pressure in commerce. We have to be in the courts, as you know we've been in. But as you've heard me say, for those of you who have heard me in the last 100 and some odd days, it's not just the courts. It's the court of public opinion. And if we are not fighting, first educating ourselves, and then being on the streets in a very, very public way, we are not going to win. We fought back in a lot of ways. But at the end of the day, the strength of a movement cannot be ignored. The only way that is not ignored is that people see other people on the streets. The only way it's not ignored is if people are not fearful to join others. So we got to stand up, whether it's universities, courts, Congress, or on the streets in enough numbers over and over again, so it is real and it is seen. And in my judgment, although I learn from the people you're about to hear from, that is when we see backsliding reversed. So since March, AFT leaders and activists and rank and file members have mobilized in drones. What we did on March 4th was something we had never done before. 2,000 actions for the protection of our kids all across the country. We were involved and engaged in April 5th. Many of our members have been on the streets every single weekend. This last weekend, it was canvassing to stop the Medicaid cuts. It's been for Social Security. It's been for protecting our universities. It's been for public education. But we need to do this more often and in more numbers, that is repeated and where it cannot be ignored. That's why June 14th, we will be in the No King's Day protests across the country. But let me turn it over to the experts tonight, who we are so lucky to have. These are three remarkable people. Erica Chenoweth is a political scientist, at Harvard. She knows political science. She is a political scientist. They have authored or edited 9 books, dozens of articles. Look, Erica, after I just wrote one, I have no idea how you can do so many. It almost killed me. But dozens of articles, 9 books on mass movements, on nonviolent resistance, on terrorism, on political violence, on revolutions, on state repressions, including, get this name because we're going to put some of these in the chat, Civil Resistance, What Everyone Needs to Know, and On Revolution. Erica's current book project, The End of People Power, investigates the puzzling decline in the success of civil resistance movements in the past decades, even as the technique has become more popular worldwide. And along with Zoe Marks, Erica is also the author of the forthcoming book, Bread and Roses, Women on the Front Lines of Revolution, which explores women's participation and how that impacts mass movements. Then I'm going to introduce all 3 of them right now, and then I'm going to shut up. Ivan Marovic. Ivan, I hope I said it all right, is Executive Director of ICNC, the International Center on Nonviolent Conflict. He was one of the leaders of Otpor, the student resistance movement that played an essential role in the downfall of Slobodan Milošević in Serbia. I'm just going to say Milošević in Serbia, for those of you who remember. This successful democratic transition in Serbia was not automatic, but afterwards, thank God, Ivan has been consulting with various pro-democracy groups worldwide and has become one of the leading practitioners in the field of strategic nonviolent conflict. He is the author of the book, we got a lot of book writers here, The Path of Most Resistance, a step-by-step guide to planning nonviolent campaigns. And it's available in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Catalan. And our last speaker tonight is someone, as we are thinking about the 5th anniversary of the murder of George Floyd, is Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould. She is a pastor and an activist whose ministry and community work is rooted in the biblical mandate for justice. I love that, the biblical mandate that moors in the Exodus theory. She is the executive director of Missouri Faith Voices and the pastor of Quinn Chapel AME Church in Jefferson City, Missouri. She's a proud native of Demopolis, Alabama, and an ordained elder in the AME Church. She's an alumna of Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville and Columbia College, and she holds her Master's of Divinity from Eden Seminary and a Doctor of Ministry from UTS, United Theological Seminary. So let me start with Erica. Can you share some of your research findings on what makes civil resistance movements succeed? Thank you, all three of you, for being here.
Thank you so much, Randy. I'm so grateful to be here with you all tonight and with such respected colleagues on this panel. I am here in my personal capacity as a concerned citizen, as a student of history, and as a teacher. And we're gathering during what I see as an extraordinary crossroads in U.S. history. It's a moment in which civil society and civic institutions either push back and defend democracy in the U.S., or the country will careen more deeply into far-right authoritarianism and lawlessness. So the question before us is what can be done, and I would answer with what I think is good news, which is that each of us can do a great deal. It matters what we do, and it especially matters what we do together. We can learn from countries that have come back from the brink some very important lessons. And even though our context is, of course, unique, it's also true that research in my field anyway suggests that in about every major historical example of the past 100 years where countries have reversed course during a backsliding episode or have had a total breakthrough of democracy in an otherwise autocratic regime, it was movements that made the difference. So institutions like the courts cannot save us by themselves in a backsliding episode. In backsliding episodes, the primary problem is that the institutions have either been sidelined or appropriated by the autocrat, and so they themselves cannot provide the beachhead for democracy. Whether we're talking about how the civil rights movement in the US mobilized against the autocratic Jim Crow system of segregation in the South, how the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa created a democratic breakthrough against a white supremacist regime, how the Solidarity movement organized and mobilized against authoritarianism in Poland, how Chileans broke through the fear and terror of Pinochet's far-right regime to peacefully force his ouster, or how South Koreans mobilized against a coup just a few months ago. The most important factor is a strong and sustained defense of freedom, justice, and accountability, from the grassroots to the grass tops. And I should say labor has been central in every one of the examples I just mentioned. Even when it seems far-fetched, even when it seems scary, it is always a possibility for people to push back effectively. And that's because there's no government, no matter how tyrannical, that is monolithic. Every tyrant or aspiring tyrant is completely dependent on cooperation, obedience, and help of thousands and thousands of people in various pillars of support. And those pillars can include the business and economic community, civil servants, cultural and religious figures, political appointees, media, and security forces that include the military and police. Aspiring autocrats always try to project strength, permanence, and absolute loyalty and fealty. And they do this to try to make people feel powerless, alone, demoralized, and demobilized. But we aren't powerless, we're not alone. Actually, people who oppose oligarchy, lawlessness, autocracy are in the majority. And autocratic power is not permanent. It's actually extremely fragile. Loyalty has to be constantly refreshed and rewarded. And this means that there are near constant opportunities to dislocate the power holder from their pillars and make it harder for them to implement their plans. There's always a spectrum of loyalty and a spectrum of allies for a movement. And the thing that movements do that win is they get just enough people not to cooperate with the power grab. How does this happen? It happens through civil resistance, which is when ordinary people decide to work together in a coordinated strategic way to defend, demand, and improve democracy through nonviolent means. As I mentioned in all of the cases I mentioned before and many others, labor has played a truly vital role. And although not every attempt succeeds, many attempts have been defeated, there are some patterns in what makes these movements successful. I'll mention 4 key factors that can be very useful to keep in mind. The first key factor is numbers and momentum. So obviously movements that win tend to gain more and more participants over time, but they also importantly gain fewer and fewer opponents over time. So the idea is to basically divide and rule the opponent. And focusing on inducing those loyalty shifts and those pillars of support can be a key way that this happens. Labor is essential in this because of the power of labor itself and the ability to withhold labor, because of the moral power of labor and workers, because of the organizing and negotiating capacities that exist in many different labor unions that are hard to come by in other sectors of society, because of the discipline that organized labor often is able to deploy, and because of solidarity across different labor elements of the labor movement, which we've seen in campaigns from the California Great Boycott to the Montgomery bus boycott, and even the March on Washington, which some might remember was actually the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, in which A. Philip Randolph and Bayard Rustin, pillars of the labor movement, were key. In Chile, it was miners who kicked off the resistance to Pinochet, going on strike in a way that actually cut to the core of some of the moral claims of the movement. In South Africa, it was economic pressure that created political pressure for the National Party to unban the ANC, begin negotiations, and approve the country's first ever democratic elections. The Solidarity movement in Poland was literally a trade association that built the irresistible alternative, laying the path for a democratic transition. So the idea here is to just basically get people to move one wedge over, away from the autocrat and toward the movement, even if it's just getting partial sympathizers or passive opponents to become more neutral about the conflict. And that's a much smaller lift than trying to melt the heart of the autocrat. This is not the way most movements win. It's more just by constraining their options and reducing their base of popular support. The third thing that successful movements do is they maintain resilience and organizational discipline, even as violence or the threat of violence against the movement escalates. Unfortunately, most movements that genuinely threaten autocratic power at some point experience violence. And the movements that are prepared for that escalation and are prepared to basically wield their power regardless of what happens are those that are able to sustain and even multiply their impacts in the aftermath of a violent episode against them. And then the fourth thing that successful movements do is they innovate new tactics, meaning that they build on not just methods of nonviolent protest and persuasion, but also non-cooperation and the building of alternative institutions. So I'll close by just making a couple of observations about where this is already happening in the United States. So right now, there's a little bit of a public discourse that there's like no real resistance happening to what's Trump's agenda. And that's not true at all. My team at the Crowd Counting Consortium has been tallying protests every single day in this country for the last 8 years. And what I can tell you is that our latest data show that there are 3 times as many protests that have happened by the end of April 2025 as has happened up to now in 2017. So we're well ahead of an accelerating movement that is building pressure over time. The second thing is that we have seen innovative tactics around things like non-cooperation and a new appetite for this. This includes boycotts and boycotts, sellbacks of Teslas, corporate shareholder votes that reject proposals to eradicate DEI, et cetera. And so ultimately moving to the capacity to withhold labor through strikes is something that successful movements do. In fact, the general strike itself is perhaps the most effective method of nonviolent resistance that has ever been developed. And then the third type of sort of category of actions are things like alternative institutions. You might think of this as building beloved community, building a vision for a future that appeals, that is irresistible. And we're seeing the beginnings of that through the development of mutual aid, the organizing of workers who've been laid off, and a new sense of civic solidarity among those who are trying to push back against the backsliding. So there are many, many examples from history and I think from what is emerging in our country right now of people committed to resisting authoritarianism. And in fact, if history is any guide, what Randi said is right, that it's winnable. I just want to close because I saw that poll a second ago about how concerned folks are about what's going on. And there's a sociologist named James Jasper who wrote a book on the emotions of protest. And in his book, he makes the argument that the emotion of fear demobilizes people. It demotivates people and keeps them from participating and recognizing the full scope of their agency. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that even when things feel very scary, which they often do, the magic combination of kind of mass mobilization is a combination of outrage and hope. Outrage is just a refusal to go along with things that are just downright wrong. And hope is the feeling we get when we know we can do something about it and that what we do matters. And so to the extent that folks can just wake up every day like I do and recognize what's going on, but also tap quickly into the agency that I still have as a person living in this country with the many tools and the many networks that I have at my disposal, that's a good combination, you know, and so I'm hopeful today, even if I'm not totally optimistic, but I'm hopeful that we can do together what we can't do alone, and I am grateful to be in it with you all. Thank you.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Erica, and thank you for sharing the findings. And we have also, again, Erica and they and their co-authors have written several remarkable books on all of this. So I want to go to Yvonne right now, and I just, you know, what are the lessons? I mean, it's just amazing to see you, and that, you know, given who Milošević was and given what was happening in Serbia, it's just remarkable to have you tell this story. But tell us some of the lessons from Otpor. Sorry, I can't speak today. And just the anatomy of that kind of authoritarian resistance and the lessons for today.
Thank you, Randi, and thanks everybody for being here today. I'm really honored to be with you all. I think like maybe I should start like how I actually first learned about Milošević. I was 14 years old and didn't care much about politics. And when actually the authoritarian takeover, Milošević and his clique took place. And what was interesting, at the time, that was actually very popular. He was very popular, and what he was doing was also very popular. He called it anti-bureaucratic revolution, because of course everybody hates bureaucrats, because bureaucrats make our lives more difficult. And so when he announced that he's going to go after all these bureaucrats as a new leader, everybody cheered. What people didn't realize was that he was going to replace those bureaucrats with loyalists. And these loyalists are going to actually end up not just ruining the country, but actually these loyalists were also, and Milošević himself, responsible for the fall of Yugoslavia and the war and the suffering and everything that we went through. But I was somehow shielded from this because I was in high school and then enrolled in the university. And as we started feeling this more and more as young people, and especially the fact that we didn't have many options and that the situation looked very bleak, and we got politicized, I would say an important element in that was the fact that, this was all happening at the university. So authoritarian takeover, when it starts, I said anti-bureaucratic revolution. The first thing is take over the administrative state, civil service, then take over take on political parties, take on different, elements of civil society. And towards the end of that takeover, one of the few remaining institutions still standing is the university. And so this was the case in Serbia in the 90s. And so we, as students, were not just defending university and autonomy and freedom of university, but we were trying to defend some of the kind of basic values that we were taught by our teachers, by our professors, the values of critical thinking, of not submitting to authority, but rather taking the authority of evidence and authority of argument, and not the authority of person. And in a sense, we were grateful for kind of coming of age in that institution of higher learning. And that's why university was the hotbed of resistance. So, of course, Milošević eventually did try to take on the university, and this is the birth of our movement, of the Otpor movement, which literally means resistance. Another thing is not just the importance of higher learning and the importance of teachers in our upbringing, but also I would like to stress the importance of unions. Unions, especially independent trade unions at the time, were actually very supportive of youth organizing and student organizing. When you are a student, you're trying to organize, you don't have much, but you also don't need much. You need a place where you can meet, and you need maybe like a bullhorn, and maybe you need like some place where you can print flyers. And this is what actually unions in our case were really kind of forthcoming, and they were really helpful, and they understood the importance of supporting youth organizing, and in a sense, really helped us in that first initial phase. So if we go, I will show you some of the kind of pictures from those days. So, for instance, I would say one of the most important enemies in fighting authoritarianism, especially after the takeover actually really becomes prevalent, is not really fear, but apathy. There are people who are afraid, and there are reasons for people to be afraid, but most people are actually apathetic. They think that there is nothing that can be done. And it was very important for us in that stage, when we were still a small student movement before the numbers increased, was to actually shake people out of that apathy, to kind of show that what is happening is something that should be resisted. And this was the days before social media, before like it was the Stone Age of the internet. So in a sense, in order to kind of draw attention, we need to have like very vivid imagery. We had to use street actions that are going to draw attention and to initiate conversations with people. And these conversations were really about the problems that people were facing, but they also led to recruitment and to incorporation of ordinary people into the movement. So in a sense, through that persistent action of like a whole cohort of young people, we were able to increase numbers over time, build coalitions, and then create like a very wide front that was able to, how should I say, mount a challenge to Milošević in the election, which after losing the election, Milošević was forced to step down. I would say one more thing. We were faced with severe repression in the process. Not in the beginning, because everybody underestimated, a bunch of kids doing silly actions like the one that is on the picture. But after a while, when Milošević and the regime realized that what we are doing is actually gaining traction, and that more people are joining, and that not just that they're joining, but there is actually a strategy being formed, and that there is a road to transition. The only possible solution that he had was repression. Because of our choice of non-violent method, and because when we were faced with repression, we actually used that repression to show how vile the regime's crackdown was, we actually made that repression backfire. And even more so, it actually shook the trust that the police force had in its own leadership, that ordered them to do the repression against us, and it actually undermined and undermined the loyalty, and actually caused the defection of that same police. So on the day when Milošević stepped down, it happened without a single shot fired. Nobody believed it. He was the butcher of the Balkans. He was like capable of causing great harm. But because all these pillars of support, as we call them, all these institutions that were propping up that regime, they actually switched sides. The transition actually was very smooth and totally bloodless. So if there is a lesson that I can share, is that persistence and movements over longer period of time help with different aspects of the civil society, but most notably trade unions, and young people at the forefront can actually make impossible things possible, and can create transitions that are not even perceived as likely, but it did happen even in Serbia. That is my story.
Oh my God. Again, thank you so much. And I don't normally write a whole bunch of notes to myself during these webinars, because I'm trying to focus on all of you, but I'm like writing notes upon notes upon notes to try to actually really figure out, and I want our chatters and the people who are in the listening as well to really think about what are the most important things that we're taking away from this in terms of how we turnkey this into, lessons in our own locals, and what we need to do in terms of like the head of our resistance committee often says, what's the 10-minute lesson plan, and what do we do, and how do we put it together? And in fact, I think we have a form about for people about if you want to get involved in this, and we have a form that I think we're going to put up as a slide. I hope we're putting up as a slide in terms of getting involved and getting engaged. And I want to just ask our dear Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould, and I know others will call you Reverend Cassandra, but I know from my wife, who is a rabbi, I always call her by her last name. So, Reverend Gould, what you have done so much in terms of both Black Lives Matter as well as the more formal civil rights movement over all this time. And you've been really involved in grassroots resistance in the United States. I wanted to ask you not only to share some lessons, but there is a very, I hear it from communities all the time about how tired people are from fighting. And how do we reconnect, particularly people who are the most at risk here because of the erasure of the 21st century that this administration is attempting to do? So preach to us, give us some lessons here. Thank you.
If only I had the energy to preach, but yeah, first, just thank you, AFT and Shanker, and Share My Lesson, Michelle, for the invitation. As I was preparing for this, and I am a preacher, I'm a Black preacher, so I was like, make it concise. One of the things that I have been naming for audiences is that, so yes, there is definitely this rise of authoritarianism in the U.S., right? Attacking truth, trying to erode civil rights, criminalizing protest in the Capitol earlier today because a Congresswoman McIver, is being charged with a felony for allegedly assaulting ICE agent, the mayor of Chicago, for words that were spoken from a church, right? This criminalization of people who dare to resist. Now, some of you might actually believe that this is this kind of breaking news or the rise of authoritarianism, but as a person who is the direct descendant of those who were enslaved in this country, for the average Black person in America and some other people of color, it's really just a recurring headline. It is, for me, living in a Black body with the history that I have in this country, from the moment my ancestors were abducted from the West, from the shores of West Africa, and all of the centuries in between, there has been authoritarianism. There has been those who would literally seek not just to contain our freedom, but to contain our bodies so that we would never be able to access freedom. And so while I actually, I study authoritarianism in Hungary and in all of these other countries, I followed apartheid I still don't buy gas at Shell because I remember my parents not buying gas at Shell because of apartheid. So I've studied these movements, but I really want to situate it as being the seeds being in the soil mixed with the blood of many, many Black bodies, long before we were doing hashtags, before George Floyd, before Mike Brown. In the introduction, I used to pastor at Quinn Chapel. I actually am in DC now as the political director of Faith in Action National Network. But in Missouri, when Ferguson happened, these are not like new forms of resistance. These are actually tied back to what Gary Dorian he talks about this a lot. He doesn't call it this. It is the Black social gospel. I believe that these movements are as interconnected to faith. They're as much about faith and a fight for a narrative, a contesting for what Christianity in particular really is, as it is about politics. And in one of Gary's great books, Gary does a great job, in my opinion, of trying to bridge like this academic thought process about movements to the actual streets and those who are actually organizing and doing this work. And Gary reminds us in his book, The New Abolition of W.E.B. Du Bois and the Black Social Gospel, he really takes us back and reminds us of, I'm an AME pastor, of leaders like Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, reminds us of Nannie Helen Burroughs, those who actually challenge not just the state violence, but also the silence of religious leaders and the silence of a greater society, right? Gary also reminds us that Dr. King didn't have any experience as an activist when the bus boycott happened, but he had been shaped and steeped by a Black church tradition that has always found us having to rise to the occasion of fighting and resisting a government that would actually seek to deny our very existence, all while commodifying our bodies and profiting from that, all while having us, you know, in enslavement, even after enslavement was legal, so that this country might profit from it. And so when I think of what I am learning and the lessons, I actually have to, it's a Ghanaian term called Sankofa. I have to look back so that I can be able to actually move forward. I have to go back and get those seeds that have been taught to us, even if you're not a person of faith, but those seeds have been amplified. I think I sent you all some pictures. There's this picture of Selma, because and so for two reasons of the bridge, I'm sorry. That two reasons that I use that picture. I'm born 49 miles west of there, and my mother was on that bridge on Bloody Sunday. But I also don't want us to kind of compartmentalize or bifurcate a movement. Certainly eras change, but Selma is as relevant to what we are facing today as George Floyd was 5 years ago. And it is a reminder, as I said in the beginning, of this reoccurring theme in America, that not all of God's children are human enough. Not all of God's children are human enough to be free. Some would say what we're experiencing now is this legalized or these attempts to legalize, if we're honest, an ethnic cleansing of America. And those are hard things to deal with. When you talk to organizers on the streets, most of us sadly are able to admit that there is some dead Black person, some body, a literal body, a body, someone that's no longer breathing, that actually activates us into this moment. Authoritarianism is violent, and maybe, just maybe, the fact that more people are seeing the actual proclivity toward violence, we might actually move from a moment of allyship to a moment of having accomplices and people being in real solidarity. If there are lessons that I can share, whether it is from the era of Reconstruction, or even from this very moment that we are living in now, from the experience, I also had a picture, if you all can share that, of these police in the streets, right? This is what authoritarianism looks like. This is a picture from my own phone, because I was close enough to them, right? In 2014, in a residential neighborhood on West Florissant Avenue in St. Louis. This is what authoritarianism looks like. When government actually militarizes folk, there are tanks behind them, when government actually militarizes, I would call them agents of the empire, to actually harm, intimidate, and literally obstruct freedom from ordinary people who only want to live like everybody else is living. That is the picture of authoritarianism. There's one more picture I really wanted you to share. The one where it says they didn't ask us. There was a picture of, there was a particular night on August 15th, and there was a young lady who was trying to get, when she got to the protest line, there were no tanks out there. Well, by the time the night was over, tanks were there, and she couldn't get to her car. And so there was a headline on CNN and the New York Times that said, faith leaders lamenting because of looting. And I was like, that's not what happened. I used that no one asked us because today even there's not enough conversation and relationship with people who are on the ground. It is inadequate to study movements and not actually engage in people who are actually engaging in movements in your communities every day because they've been having to fight for their lives. The lessons that I would offer is to not just look abroad, but to look at the blood that the American soil has been soaked with and actually acknowledge and own that this is America. Every time I hear particularly a politician say that something egregious happens and it's not America, I'm like, it's the America that I have always known. It's the America that my ancestors have known. 3 lessons. Authoritarianism is also, in my opinion, I'm a faith leader. It's a religious and a spiritual crisis of such. These people are doing this under the guise of some kind of faith, not the kind that I know about. So resistance must also be spiritually rooted. We do learn so much from the labor movement, but right alongside labor, and often even in front of labor, faith has also been a part of these movements. And so we learn a lot from faith lessons of how people of faith have garnered their moral courage and actually resisted. Augustine said, an unjust law is no law at all. Empire doesn't just attack Black bodies, but it literally, in Black, brown bodies that are not the bodies of white, wealthy, cis gender appearing men. It actually tells Black, brown, LGBTQIA plus siblings, it tells us that we are disposable. But it is the lessons from Black theology that reminds us that we are all made in God's image. So our resistance, even if you're not a person of faith, has to have some kind of a grounding in something that is beyond a system that determines who you are. I believe that community is a counterpower, right? Community being made, whether it is in a church basement, in a Zoom room, in the park, in community. I just left my beloved St. Louis, where I lived for more than 40 years. Devastating tornado hit. FEMA, nowhere to be found. The governor kind of hesitated before he actually declared an emergency so that the president and FEMA can figure out if it really is an emergency. But the people, there are more than 5,000 buildings, homes actually destroyed. The people did not hesitate. Grassroots orgs have been on the ground. It hit about 2:45 Friday. Grassroots orgs and ordinary people on the ground, helping people, put tarps over their roofs, giving out food and medical assistance and etc. Community is the counterpower to authoritarianism. And finally, we don't just, and I am definitely a proponent of non-cooperation. It is how the bus boycott, it is how multiple iterations from, as I said, whether it is from the era of Reconstruction or just last week, it in Newark, New Jersey, when faith leaders stood even after they arrested the mayor and said, yeah, we're going to disrupt business at this ICE plant. It is us not just resisting, but contesting for power. We must contest for power, and we cannot be silenced. One of the main tools of authoritarianism is literally maintaining silence, and a part of how we counter that is to not be silent. I think you, Randi, kind of alluded to like people being exhausted and etc. I know that, there's all of this narrative like, yeah, where were the black people on August the 5th? We are playing the long game. It's not that black people in general are not, but there's also this way in which people are tired of fighting alone, and people want to know that we are not just being neighbors, but that neighbors are also being neighborly with us. And so I believe if we are going to defeat this, it is going to be all of us examining ourselves, saying that we will disrupt all of the conditioning that we have that perpetuates a fraudulent notion of human hierarchy. Authoritarianism succeeds because we believe the myths.
So, first off, thank you. And I always believe, and it could be that I'm married to a rabbi, but I always believe faith has a role. I always I get prickly when people think that when we fight for public education and we say public education has to be pluralistic, that it doesn't mean that we are anti-faith. Many of us are very pro-faith and very much, go to Sunday school and then have, public education. So thank you so much for all of that. And I think that all three of you, and I know I could go on and on and on, but I also know it's a school night for people, so we're going to go to, I think, 9:15 or so. You have all kind of answered a lot of the questions that I have written down, but also that we have been getting from our audience participation. But I do want to ask each one of you, I think I want to target this one to Erica, and then I definitely want to target something to the Reverend, and then Yvonne, you talked a lot about youth, so I want to target a general one, but actually ask you to answer first. And if there are things that I'm missing, feel free to answer the question you want to answer instead of the question I'm asking, because the three of you are steeped in such expertise. I feel very incompetent in even asking the questions. But Erica, you said a few times about, and your research has shown that nonviolent movements are more effective than violent ones. And that, and I don't remember if it was you, I think it was you who said something about, but all of these movements, sometimes there is some violent episode. But what would your advice be? Because I can see already this huge nonviolent movement is going to actually be defamed as violent. And, it wasn't on April 5th, but we're already starting to see some of the extreme right making some of these suggestions when we were planning for nonviolence. So give us a little bit of advice of inflection points we need to watch for, interventions to meet people to constructive nonviolent actions? And frankly, am I asking the right question?
Thank you, Randi, and thank you so much, Yvonne and Reverend Gould, as well. I think maybe I can respond, Randi, just with conveying a particular sequence of events that took place in Nashville during the desegregation campaign there. So one of my mentors was Reverend James Lawson, who was like a pillar of the civil rights movement, and who at the time was a young minister who was organizing in church basements preparation and training for people to learn how to engage in non-cooperation and actually do sit-ins in lunch counters and stop buying from department stores where segregation was taking place, and basically to completely withdraw their cooperation from the system of segregation throughout the city. And it was known that in doing so, there was going to be violence visited against people. And so they would actually do role playing to prepare people for the emotions of that and the physical experience of that and the embodiment of that and the ability to maintain their own agency and nonviolent discipline when that happened. The movement also did a lot to prepare for collective nonviolent discipline, not just for individuals, giving them the spiritual, moral, emotional, and physical resources for that, and the sort of advanced preparation and the sort of theory of nonviolent action that was necessary for them to buy into being willing to take those risks. But they also did collective action preparation that allowed them to respond to like deeply terrifying incidents of white supremacist terrorism against the movement in strategic ways. So for example, there was a lawyer in town named Alexander Luby, who was a Black lawyer representing many of the students who were being arrested, not for committing a crime, but for simply sitting in lunch counters that for whites only. And so students were increasingly loaded into the backs of police vans, taken in, put in jail, never charged with crimes, because it wasn't a crime. It was just not allowed, right? So Alexander Luby was representing them, and his home, his family home, was bombed by the Ku Klux Klan. And in response to that, the movement organized a silent march from his home to the steps of the city hall. And thousands of people joined the silent march. Why is that significant? A silent march is a highly disciplined event. It is very hard, or it's very easy, I should say, to know like who might be a provocateur at a silent march, right? And the silent march conveys a total clarity about which side is lawless and which side is going to take a totally obvious moral fight right to power. And they confronted the mayor, West, Diane Nash, a Black student from Fisk University, went right up to him and said, Mayor Nash, or Mayor West, do you actually believe that it's morally right to discriminate against somebody who wants to buy something here on the basis of the color of their skin? And you know what? Standing in front of 5,000 people who just come in a silent march with a microphone in his face and the camera's rolling, he said, no, I don't believe it's morally right. Right? So
Wow.
like that in that moment, like, you know, in the background, there was a negotiation. The negotiation was that the signs would come down and the department stores would desegregate. There wouldn't be a public announcement of it because they were worried about white supremacist retaliation to the entire downtown business district, but it functionally ended. And
Wow.
and so like there was a sequence of events that just demonstrated the lack of the total like discipline on the part of the movement, because they had prepared, and it took a long time to prepare, and people who knew what they were doing, right, and who could inspire that level of discipline. So I think I just tell that story to convey the capacities that I think we do have in our we can do that, right?
Yeah.
But would need to do it, right? In order to
Yes.
be prepared for the types of violent episodes that might be visited upon people.
That's really helpful and such a great story. And what I also want to do is Kelly Booz, who runs Share My Lesson, and uh, Mary Catherine Bricker, who runs ASI, Albert Schenker Institute. I think we should actually do a lesson. We've done lessons about Bayard, for example, and about the March on Washington, but I think we should do a lesson about Jim Lawson and just his, you know, just his, you know, role in teaching so many of us about not only nonviolent protest, but the why it is so important. It's, you know, obviously Gandhi, obviously Bayard, obviously Mandela, obviously others in history have had a huge footprint, but Jim Lawson has had a huge footprint as well. And I'm so glad that you raised him, Erica. I want to ask Reverend Gould, this is you just talked about the long game, but the erasure that is going on right now of the movement for freedom and actually having real freedom for in America for the people who are I could say black and brown, but let me just say black. This level of erasure right now, the making words like diversity, equity, inclusion bad words, this investigation of Brandon Johnson for talking in a church about legacy and the promotion of people of his faith and people who are African American. I am stunned. I am stunned by it. So the question I have for you is, what are some of the lessons from our history that, like, how do we deal with erasure? And how, I mean, Erica, I think, said, or maybe it was you who said, or maybe it was Yvonne who said the words outrage and faith, outrage and outrage and hope. The question is, how are you helping people deal with the complete outrage of being erased?
So again, it's a recurring theme. What you have now is just someone who gets on the 5 o'clock news, it's on social media, and etc., that actually reminds people that there is the legislated, although illegal, through the power of the executive branch, that they are going to attack. But I keep reminding people, don't use this kind of rhetoric around we've been here before, because some people haven't. But Black people, we've been here before being erased, right? We've been here before. There's probably more times that we have been erased than we've not been erased, right? We're only talking a 50 to 60 year period when people were actually acknowledging the work. We had affirmative action and we had the Civil Rights Bill because of hundreds of years of erasure. And so the outrage has not changed for us. It is just now that people are like, oh, this is like crazy. And I think a lot of the frustration, let me use my I voice, because I speak for Cassandra, not all Black people. We're not a monolith. the frustration and the outrage that I have had, that some colleagues have had, has been, well, like, has my microphone been on? Have we not been telling you that this is what we have been dealing with basically every day of our lives? And suddenly now people are like, oh my God, this is really bad. It has been really this bad. And so the lesson is a Harriet Tubman lesson. It is a lesson that will not be broadcast on webinars. It will not possibly even be said from pulpits, not when everybody is listening. It is that people are preparing and working in ways that they've always worked. Not all of the things in the civil rights movement. Selma was also on Bloody Sunday. It was a silent march. It was a silent march protesting the death with impunity of a young black man. And so we know the risk that our bodies and our lives are under and have been. So when black elected officials are attacked or there are intimidations, it is not new. It is not the first time we've lived through death threats or any of that. What we really need in this moment are enough accomplices that will say this time you will not go by yourself. And so my real hope is that we will move from the mobilization is great because it captures the energy, to actually organizing. Organizing is a long game. Nashville worked a little faster, but it had been a long arc to get there. Bloody Sunday, some more people had to be killed and injured and etc. before it was like, oh, okay, wait, we got to do something different here. And so it is there are tactics that will have to be, as Gil Heron Scott, the famous jazz musician, said, the revolution will not be televised. So it does not mean that people are not outraged because you don't see them outside with you. People are working and doing what they need to do to keep themselves and their community safe and to continue to build alternatives, which is the work that Black folk have always done.
Thank you. I am told by our folks, if you all can do it, I'll go another 5 to 7 minutes so I can ask this question of Yvonne. I hope, and if people have to drop off, I totally understand. But let me ask this question of Yvonne, which I promised. The question I want to ask is how we sustain movements when people are scared, disillusioned, or burnt out. But what happened in Serbia, frankly, Dr. Gould, what has happened here, and Erica, I should call you Dr. Chenoweth, but the examples that we see are examples that happened over a long period of time. Solidarność happened over a long period of time, for example. Chile happened over a fairly long period of time. But how, in Serbia, Yvonne, how did you sustain that movement? How was it? How did the young people actually sustain it over the long term? And what advice do you have in terms of, and I'm going to ask the other two of you as well, when people are scared or disillusioned or burnt out? I think Dr. Gould actually answered some of it, but I think it's an important question to ask.
Yeah, the question of sustaining a movement over a longer period of time is key, because every how shall I say, uprising starts with a protest and with people pouring into the streets. That's my experience. I cut my teeth in the student protest. We were marching every day in the streets for 4 months. For 4 months every day. And after that, we were the ones that were exhausted. Our parents were the ones who were begging us to stop and to go back to studying. And we didn't hurt the regime much, because protests, although they're visible, they do create a lot of energy. They do create a lot of enthusiasm. They are nothing compared to other tactics of civil resistance, such strikes and boycotts and things that do hurt either the economic baseline or the support that the regime has. So for us, it was important to move beyond protest. So in a sense, the whole idea of building a movement is to prepare for what Reverend Gould was explaining as the long game. It's actually a fight, a struggle that is going to take years and in some cases even longer. That means the tactics that we select have to be much wider kind of repertoire than just protest. That is a very costly tactic for activists, and tactics such as strikes and boycotts and social boycotts and economic boycotts and there are different types of strikes as well. There is a kind of like a regular strike, but there is a slowdown strike, and there is a like a wildcat strike, and so expanding the repertoire was key. But another thing was also important was for us to actually build those tactics in a sequence so that it makes sense. It creates and increases momentum over time. There is a big problem in growing too fast. Growing too fast as a movement means that you don't have the ability to absorb all the people who want to join the movement. There is a danger of disillusionment, a danger of too high hopes that cannot be met. So it is important with increasing those numbers also to increase the capacity of the movement, to create, Erica was talking about parallel institutions, to create different parallel institutions that actually can transfer that mobilization into staying power. So in a sense, there is a lot of strategizing that needs to be done. In our case, that is exactly what we were doing. Between that student protest, where we kind of started with student activism, when we were given a space by the independent trade union where we could meet after that and we could strategize, over the next year or two, we were slowly building that movement in order to kind of get to the point where we can have that peaceful transition. So I would say expanding the repertoire tactics and moving beyond just protest as probably the most visible, most popular, but not maybe the most effective tactic of nonviolent action.
So it's 9:22 Eastern time. So I want to put all three of you back on the camera. And I want to just, as I hopefully keep on being really grateful to all three of you, you can tell my eyes are tired because I'm wearing my glasses. I just want to, I was going to ask as the last question, but you've shared so many tangible strategies already about the labor movement, about hope. I love this. I'm going to keep on using it. Hope and outrage, about things like silent marches and what kind of vehicle those can be, about the long game, and having some grace for people about the long game, because this is not new, particularly for our brothers and for our Black brothers and sisters and siblings. And frankly, it's so you've shared so much. So I want to just ask the following question kind of as a closing. I was going to ask, as I said, share another concrete, tangible strategy. A lot of us are teachers. We like very tangible things. But what, as you're thinking in the last hour, I wish Randi had asked this, or I wish I covered this. What's kind of like the closing remark you have in this first of, frankly, many of these workshops that we do to really exercise our muscle or create our muscle for democracy and against autocracy. And this time I'm going to start with Reverend Gould. And I'm going to end with Erica.
If there is one thing, so even for people who are in the streets, I hear there's, when it's this president's birthday, folk will probably be in the streets doing some counter activities. Flag Day. Don't just get in the streets without actually having follow-up, and follow-up is not an invitation to the next march. Follow-up starts, the lifeblood of organizing is one-to-ones. 90 million people, 90 million registered voters did not show up at the polls. 90 million. We don't have a whole answer to that because we haven't talked to all of them. But the sense of isolation, being unheard, unseen, and etc., not just by parties, but also by those of us who engage with voters, is real. And so someone has to build and be the bridge to actually go and start to talk to people, to actually disrupt the isolation and the polarization that is happening and in real time in community. So what does it look like to get 5 or 6 people together and stay connected to those 5 more, and you're actually engaging people on an ongoing basis, and you're listening to what's happening in their community, and you're finding an issue that you can work on together. Everybody can't come to DC, but there are things that are trickling down in our own communities that people have the opportunity. So this is how you fight that, that hopelessness, that powerlessness, that people can find something really quick. So non-indictment after the murder of Mike Brown, 4 years later, we go back to the young people in Ferguson who had never voted because some of them were not old enough to vote. And we talk to them and ask them, what do they want and what do they need? They want to be safe. They want to be able to get home just when they're walking down the street. And we literally help them to actually build a C4, campaign, so that we were able to get rid of a 27-year incumbent prosecutor for a young Black man who's now in Congress. But it was the people power, because we organized the people and we recognized, because you can't protest forever. As Ivan said, you'll just be exhausted and the empire will still be doing the empire. And so we have to have tactics, economic boycotts, and other tactics that actually change something for the empire and actually shifts the power for the people.
Thank you. Ivan.
I would just say that, apathy and disillusionment, it will kind of always kick in. But, I want to offer like a word of hope, apathy and disillusionment, they come and go. As long as the underlying injustice is there, we need to, how shall I say, keep faith that people are going to come back to the movement, even when they're if they're losing, because movements are kind of having those like sinusoid up and down waves. And, I was talking about, movement growing too fast. And there was a question in the Q&A, can a movement recover from growing too fast? Yes, of course. I mean, there is a phase where it grows too fast and then people get, either there is a disillusionment or there is like a downward trend, but the underlying injustice, the underlying issue is still there, and people are going to come back eventually. And in a sense, going back to what Reverend Gould said, it's a long game, and we have to be strategic about it, and to kind of be able to ride the wave when it's going up, and also to use the wave when it's going down, to re-strategize and to prepare for the next phase. And that is how these, how should I say, movements actually operate. This is how they change over time.
And last but never least, thank you, both of you. Erica.
Sure, yeah. So I was thinking, one of the things that comes through a lot of the scholarship on backsliding is that there are very few, if any, cases where people power movements have succeeded without building something kind of extraordinary, which is some kind of, in South Africa, they call it the United Democratic Front, and other places they call, umbrella organizations of civil society, where it's like thousands of different parts of nonviolent, autonomous civil society decide to do something together, right? Which is to say, we're going to both push back on the authoritarianism, and we're going to begin to lay out the process of taking the country to actually a new and better place, right? And so the sort of the negative coalition of the, no, we're not going further down, we're not going down, and also the yes coalition of, and here's where we can go together. And so both of those things can happen at the same time and in parallel. They're sort of parallel lines of effort. But what I would say is that, it's a very interesting question, is like, how would, in the United States today, with as fragmented as our civil society is, how might we come together and build a united democratic alliance in this country? Because that would be something really, really extraordinary, and is perhaps what the moment calls for. So, that I'm thinking about that a lot these days, and I hope others might think about it too. And there's a lot from our history, as has been mentioned, and the histories of many nations besides ours that show us truly how transformative that can be, like generationally transformative for a country to have a really new and renewed democratic experiment.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's it.
Well, it's, I was having that same exact conversation with a former attorney general literally 3 hours ago about how we do that and how we envision it, but also how we do it in a way, as Reverend Gould said, that people who have never had it feel like it's real. And in a way that we capture the imagination of youth, which is what you did, Ivan, in Serbia. And so part of this is, I can't thank you enough. We, the AFT, and I have taken far too much of your time tonight, but you can see a lot of love here. You can see it in the questions that were being asked in the chat. I think a lot of you actually were also engaging in responding to some of the chat, which I loved. And we are committed to this work for, and it feels trite to say it, a more perfect union, understanding full well that that words have to be combined with actions and with intent, and with a sense that we are in it for everyone, not just for ourselves individually, which is what, frankly, most of our members who make a difference in people's lives every single day try to do. So I want to just do two kind of quick takes here, or two kind of call to actions. One is, I mentioned No King's Day, which is June 14th, which is also Flag Day. And it is the day that the president is throwing himself a multi-million-dollar military parade in Washington, D.C. for his birthday, as he's cutting billions of dollars of aid for people in America. Now, let me be clear. We have to honor the service of our veterans and active duty service members on Flag Day who pledged loyalty to a constitution. We want to make sure that we honor them and not have this pitted as the president is honoring the veterans, and we are not. But I don't think that that's going to be a problem, because veterans all over this country, Flag Day was about fighting tyrants, was about fighting kings, was about fighting fascists, and it was honoring them in terms of the end of a war. And so on Flag Day, on No King's Day, on this mass protest, as the president is having his military parade, there are over 100 organizational partners already, over 800 events already scheduled, more hourly. Find one near you, start one on your own, bring friends, make handmade signs, bring some fun. And it's important that we are on the streets, visible for one another and visible for those who don't feel like they can speak for themselves. The other thing I wanted to raise today is you saw a form. And on some ways I am reminded, and maybe it's because this story is how I start my book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. It's a story of paperclips and Norwegian teachers and what they did to try to stop the Nazis. And they did this in schools all throughout Norway and in a community, as teachers in a community. And so I want to actually go back to that form. Let's go back to the other slide. That there may be some of you who say, yeah, I want more of this. I want to hear more. I want to understand more. I want to be more engaged and involved, like all of us are saying. Apathy, Yvonne said several times, apathy is a real enemy, even more of an enemy than fear. And so if there is an interest that you have or that your local has in terms of this Democracy Defenders campaign, I'm not sure that that's going to be the full name or the only name, but if you're interested, please, please, please fill out that form. And I just want to say again to our panelists, I just can't thank you enough. Every one of our panelists, just like every one of the people who are listening, they are doing this work, this justice work, this democracy work all the time. And so for them to be with us today and spend this much time and prepare in the exquisite way that they did, I'm just really grateful. So on behalf of our 1.8 million members, on behalf of those of us who are committed to fighting for a more perfect union, a more just union, a place where there is opportunity for all and dignity for all, a place where people have real voice and agency. I just want to say to Erica Chenoweth, to Yvonne Marovic, to Reverend Cassandra, Reverend Dr. Cassandra Gould, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really, really appreciate you. We thank you for your work and thank you for your words. Thank you.